ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ, ਵੈਲਕਮ। ਔਰ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਰਾਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੋਏ ਆ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ,
ਮਿਸਟਰ ਨਾਈਜਲ ਲੋਗਨ ਸਾਡੇ ਅੱਜ ਇੱਥੇ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਨੇ ਜੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। NDP ਦੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਨੇ ਐਡਮਿੰਟਨ ਮਿਲਵੁੱਡਸ ਤੋਂ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਵਾਂਗੇ। ਵੈਸੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਆ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਪੂਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਆ ਜੀ, ਪਰ ਗੱਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਹੀ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ।
ਬਟ ਸਰ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਪੁੱਛੋ, ਜਵਾਬ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੇ
मैं बहुत समझता हूँ but my Punjabi is not very good spoken, so
हिंदी आती है ज्यादा या पंजाबी आती है ज्यादा?
मैं हिंदी सीख रहा हूँ, हिंदी और उर्दू।
उर्दू, ओके।
मेरी बेगम हैदराबाद से।
हैदराबाद से है, क्या बात है।
So I'm learning
so you like biryani, Hyderabadi biryani?
Oh, I've heard all the arguments about biryani and you know, the proper way to make biryani, no fruits, no aloo.
Yes.
No, you know.
No, I was thinking if you praise that, I would like to ask you to can we invite it to your biryani day one night, biryani night one evening?
Oh, absolutely.
I love to taste Hyderabadi biryani, you know, if it's done right. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's, you know, I mean, like, I know we're talking a political thing, but here in Millwoods, like, there's so many different, there's every state has its own culture, its own language, everything like that. And so down in Hyderabad, you know, they're pretty proud of their, you know, they have their own dialect, they're pretty proud of their food, but, you know.
Yeah. When you went to Hyderabad?
No, I've never been, actually. I've visited Gujarat and Maharashtra, actually, a couple of years ago. We were going to visit Hyderabad, but COVID pandemic made things
so you know, like in India, it's very offensive to go to that country or to that is nearby the city and not visit your in-law city, you know.
I knew where you're going.
Well, at the time I wasn't married. I went with a family friend, and but it was a good experience. Like, it gave me a different insight to how, like, you know, we were talking just before we went on air about how politics works, and part of this job, in a way, I find it funny that I do sort of have to follow Indian and Pakistani politics because the community is so, you know, like there's. People are very political. It's not like
very involved,
you know, and,
very involved.
And I think that's great. And you know, personally, as a political nerd, I kind of enjoy it. So
in India, let me tell you the difference. We have like some million registered voters in Canada, and our turnout is in somewhere less than 50% each time, or maybe little bit better than 50 if we have very close contest. In India, there's over a billion registered voter, and we have 80% turnout in the election.
Yeah, and that's amazing. Like here in Canada, it's in the 60s.
Yes.
You know, even worse on the municipal side, where we see 25% turnout.
30%, 25%. Yes.
And what I've always kind of said, because you know, if there's a saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the table.
That's right.
And I think everyone should be at the very least voting, but they should also, you know, politics is more than just voting. It's getting involved. It's making your views known. It's volunteering even.
Do you see that it could happen in Canada ever? The way they introduced the law in Australia, if you don't vote, you get a ticket. Do you think that will happen in Canada?
I don't know that it will happen. I don't think so. I don't think it's a bad idea because I think more civic engagement is always better because it's just like the census. It's mandatory as well. And we use that data for very important decisions at all levels of government. So businesses use it as well. Going back to your point earlier about you mentioned about Indian politics. I mean, a friend of mine made an interesting point online the other day, and that was he was talking about, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic election.
Yes.
You know, we have a new public health emergency. You know, we talked in the debate the other day about the cracks in the healthcare system and all that. But I don't think it's very safe to call an election right now. We knew the wave was coming.
Yes.
The fourth wave with the Delta variant, and when we're talking about Indian and Pakistani politics, I mean, we saw a very good example where
in Bengal,
right, and where hundreds of thousands of people are coming out to rallies, and then COVID cases spiked. Our own party has called off face-to-face campaigning because of the safety factor. We can't be spreading COVID around, and
so most of your campaign is virtually campaign then.
Well, Yeah, I mean, it's a modern world. Everyone for the past 2 years has been working from, or a year and a half has been working from home, Zoom meetings and texts. In my experience, because I've knocked on about 20,000 doors or more in the last 4 years in various campaigns, just in Millwoods. And when it comes to, but people are answering the phones now. Because where otherwise you'd go to your children's soccer practice or go to Gurdwara or Masjid or something like that.
Now they're home.
They're home and they're willing to talk because I think there's a little bit of unease with the whole with the scenario right now because there's no real big picture item in this election.
I have a question for you. Just to introduce yourself, let us know where you started, how you decided to go for politics, and what your views are about the federal election.
Right. So I first got involved back in 2015. There was a couple of issues that, that I saw. Wow, Rachel Notley wins in Alberta. I never thought that would happen, and I think there's a lot of people in that similar scenario where it's not even worth trying. She wins. We can really make some nice, good, effective changes that people have been calling for years. So I joined. I joined a political party, ended up managing a campaign. Pretty soon I found myself working for a politician. It was never intended that way, but I have to say, like, it's been a really good community experience because I've met so many people. Had I not campaigned 4 years ago in the civic election, I wouldn't have met my wife.
Yes.
But more than that, not just on a personal basis, but like the community needs people that are going to stand up and say something. And so back in 2015, the big issue, I mentioned just off air, my brother-in-law is from Pakistan.
Yes.
And with the Syrian refugee crisis and things like that at the time, there was a lot of Islamophobia and racism starting up. And then as I learned about it and things like that, it's not just affecting Muslims. You have white racist folks who think Sikhs are Muslims, and you see the attacks. We've seen them since 2001 in the United States. And and I figured I had to say something. I mean, people's lives are at risk, and I it's easy for me because I never got discriminated against. But I got to say something because it's just the right thing to do, and trying to mobilize the community to do something about that.
Yes, definitely. And that's how your political journey started. And what make you run for federally this time? What happened? What is the story?
How you decided?
How I decided? Well, long discussions with my wife because it's a big family decision too. But really, the same things I talked about. There's racism and there's discrimination. But I always followed it. I was the one doing hours of research, picking who I'm going to vote for, and so there was a collection of issues that I thought were very important. But I also recognized that the role, especially learning when I started managing the campaign, your role as a politician is to channel what people ask for, or maybe they don't ask for or they need it without knowing they need it too, and channeling that into a means of action. And so that means lobbying governments at different levels for changes, and I've done that at 4 levels of government, if you include school board too.
Okay.
I've reached out to people, and part of it's just building relationships. And, so here I am running for member of parliament, and there's federal issues are very important.
Yes.
But we have to work with everybody, right?
Definitely.
Regardless of party, regardless of level of government, and because we're there to serve the population.
No offense to anything, but when this election started, it was conservative and somewhat liberal in Alberta. But now numbers are coming differently. What do you see out there? What people are mentioning, or what their concerns are on the doors, or when you talk to them over the phone or on the social media?
Yeah, well, in Millwoods is unique, I would say, because what I hear, I'm getting phone calls and messages from people who voted Conservative for 50 years. They wouldn't even vote for Rachel Notley's government, and they're switching their vote because they don't like their local representative. They don't like the Conservative Party's stance on vaccinations. They're not taking a strong stand on climate change. You can still be conservative, but think climate change is important. And so people are reaching out to me. They're taking lawn signs for this. Similarly, the Liberal support, I think it's a lot softer than people think it is. Like, we look at polls. You just mentioned that, everyone looks at those aggregators, but there was, I think, an Abacus Commission poll that has the NDP at almost 30% in Alberta, beating the Liberals by 12 points. And there's still momentum from Jagmeet Singh in the NDP campaign, and I've run out of lawn signs because people are requesting so many. And that's a nice problem to have. It's too late to order new ones, but the momentum is unlike anything I've ever seen.
Definitely. And my next question is, you are contesting from NDP, and right now, do you see this as a three-way game in a three-way election in Millwoods, or do you still see you are just catching up to the major parties?
I think it's a three-way game.
Race, yes.
Again, there's local issues that impact also national issues,
yes.
and I talked about the Liberals having a soft support, but Trudeau calling an election in the middle of a pandemic.
No.
I didn't want an election campaign. I'm ready to fight it, and I'm ready to get the voice out, and we still have our democratic duty to run and vote.
Yeah.
But people are upset about that, and I think it's a change election. We'll see. Everything's up in the air right now. We're just doing the work and talking to as many people as we can before Monday.
Very good.
And the question for you is, what concerns do you hear from your constituents? What problems do they have which you can address if get elected?
Right. So healthcare. This came up a ton in the debate. Its number one issue is healthcare, and there's always been this jurisdiction argument by the federal Liberals over why we can't do something. So why can't we implement pharmacare? Oh, well, that's provincial jurisdiction. But we already know we can structure the bill like the Canada Health Act, which, again, health is a provincial jurisdiction as well, but it's a federally mandated bill. And you can tie targets to that, funding targets. Basically, the way I heard it put was this. A friend of mine who's a lab technologist for Alberta Health, I don't know exactly what branch, but she was saying, there's people, do you know how many people are in a $1,500 a day hospital bed because they can't afford their $5 medication?
Yeah.
So there's a huge cost savings.
Yes.
And when we only look at budgets at federal, provincial, and municipal level, it's individual things, but they all influence each other. And so there's a healthcare savings, but there's also the fact that you don't go to ER because you can't afford your insulin and things like that. And so healthcare is the number one, and COVID's been exposing those cracks. ICUs are filling up, and we're in a very dangerous time right now. Then the second thing I keep hearing about, frankly, after healthcare, well, immigration is a very local to Millwoods issue.
Yes.
In the last year and a half, we've had huge delays in every program.
Yes.
I know that the pandemic made things difficult, but the casework happens remotely.
Yes.
It's not like you can't. I understand the delays in people coming to the country. They can still give an approval until.
Yes.
So why is there a delay? That's something I'd like to get to the bottom of.
Do you hear anything about oil and sand? Because your federal leader, have a different opinion than the rest of the politicians. Oil and gas is very close to our hearts in Alberta, in Millwoods as well. Do you hear some concerns about that?
Oh, absolutely. Some of those conservative voters, long-time conservative voters I've talked to have said that. But the frank answer is the economy is changing. It came up in the debate as well. India and China are divesting off of oil and gas, and their economies slow down every time the price of oil goes up. We can't rely on some outside party to save our economic skins. It's the same way in COVID. We don't have any local PPE production. Mm-hmm. We don't have local vaccines. We don't have any very few local pharmaceutical companies. If in an emergency situation, we can only rely on ourselves.
Yes.
And so when we it's not like out of the goodness of our hearts that India and China are, oh, we'll buy lots of oil. No. We need to plan for the future. And the NDP plan is to remove oil and gas subsidies, which I think are artificially keeping the industry afloat, and it's preventing us from getting those workers into new industries. I mean, there's a lot of things. To elaborate a bit, because people always talk about resource extraction and manufacturing, but there's other things out there. I come from an IT background, and why can't we make ourselves into an IT hub? We haven't really done many things to attract skilled workers or foreign credential recognition. There's many folks that come from Bangalore that are highly educated, very competent, and they can't find jobs in Canada. Yes. And those people could be adding to our economy.
ATAM ਤੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ ਜੋ NDP ਦੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਨੇ ਮਿਲਵੁਡਸ ਹਲਕੇ ਤੋਂ ਨਾਈਜਲ ਲੋਗਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ thank you so much again, welcome back, and I have a question for you.
Sure.
Why would people vote for you?
Well, I mean,
give your message to them.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the policies, and those are absolutely important. People vote policy, but I also think local representation matters. And I know this keeps coming up with my two opponents because neither of them live in the riding. And you have to be present. I've worked for a member of parliament. The Ottawa bubble is a bubble. It's totally different than local. And if you stay there, you're not going to know what's happening locally. It's just you get caught up in the day-to-day, the parliamentary stuff, but you have to be back in the riding to know what people are thinking.
Definitely.
So if you get elected, what kind of changes will you bring? What would you do for the Millwoods residents in here?
Right. So one of the things that because I did the casework for immigration, I mentioned this in the debate the other day. This is one of the things I think we could see some major improvements. And, policies, like all the other policies, the big picture stuff, I think this is a really important issue for Millwoods residents. And I think we can do better on that. I have quite a number of ideas on how we can improve the immigration system, from the parent-grandparent sponsorship, expanding it perhaps to family members that aren't your parents or grandparents, given the extended families that are common here. I think there's a lot of work that can be done, and I think this will be one of my priorities that I bring to the table.
Definitely. So any message you would like to convey to your voters, and do you have any help available on the voting day if somebody need help, a ride or instructions or where to go and vote?
Right.
Do you have that in place?
Well, we do have that in place. I would say, though, people need to be careful on election day with the pandemic. There are going to be lineups. Bring your mask. They're doing contact tracing as well. But at the same time, I think voters are pretty motivated this time. They didn't want that election. Even my provincial colleagues are, they're helping out behind the scenes a little bit because they recognize that what an NDP MP and an NDP government can do. The stuff we can get done on childcare and pharmacare and post-secondary education. Absolutely, there's a ton of agreement there, and we'll be working very hard together on those kind of issues.
So when you discuss the pharmacare and all that, sometimes people ask or wonder, where all that money going to come from? Yeah. We are already in a big, huge debt. Canada debt is unbelievable. Yeah. So how that will happen?
So there's two-part answer. The first part is on a program like pharmacare or childcare, any dollar we invest, we get more back in return in economic benefits.
Okay.
For example, if you have to give up your career for 5 years because you've had a child or 2 children, and you lose your engineering certification, your salary might go to half of what it was. But if you can keep the job, then the revenue that comes back from taxes more than pays for it. The second aspect is there's a bit of misnomer about public debt, because there's good debt and there's bad debt. The good debt is when we use it to invest in the economy. And a good example of that was with the CERB and the Canada wage subsidy. Those kept many, many millions of people in their jobs.
In the jobs, yes.
And at home safe. And that cost about $80 billion. That sounds like a lot. But like I said the other day, 600 billion in addition to that was printed for the banks, and that 600 billion is rapidly increasing house prices. I just saw new home builds year over year up 14% in price. How, if someone's trying to get into the market, how can you do that? So it's a question of affordability. And so what I would like to say is if we invest in, it's not social programs that are causing it. It's the bad investments by the Liberal government that are doing that.
But printing new currency, you have to have some gold in the reserve, or you have to have some bonds from the World Bank. How Canada is printing new currency at this time?
Well, we have the Canadian dollar is independent, so we can, in theory, we can print trillions and trillions and trillions.
Really?
But then you end up with a situation like, say, 1920s Germany, when you see images of people walking around with wheelbarrows full of notes.
Yes.
And there's a real danger to devaluing the currency that much because then our purchasing power goes down, and in a global economy, we're paying for things from overseas. So just printing money to pay for things is not the way to do it. The NDP plan is a twofold. When we talk about taxing the wealthy, it's not just because they're wealthy. It's because the level of inequality causes societal issues, and when you have homelessness next to a homeless person next to a mansion, I personally think there's something morally wrong with that. But there's also the societal effects when that homeless person, say, steals your catalytic converter in the neighborhood because they can't afford to eat.
Yes.
If we can address those social issues, then you don't get affected by it.
Mr. Logan, thank you very much for coming. I know you're a busy guy for next few days, and wish you all the best. And hopefully after the election, we'll see you back.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I like these open forum discussions. It's a little bit more conversational, and
yes.
This is what I'm trying to talk to voters. Is I want them to know that I'm there for them, that I'm going to fight for them locally and in Ottawa.
I'm looking forward for Hyderabadi biryani one day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.